Hello, good afternoon. The Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson says the government has evidence that Russia's been making and stockpiling Novichok, the nerve agent that Britain says was used to try and kill the Russian spy Sergei Skripal and his daughter in Salisbury. Mr. Johnson accused the Russians of smug sarcasm after their ambassador to the EU suggested the nerve agent could have come from Britain's own Porton Down Research Centre, which is near Salisbury. Here's our Home Affairs correspondent, Daniel Sanford.
After 2 weeks of delicate investigation and decontamination work in Salisbury, in which police officers and troops have had to take extraordinary precautions to protect themselves, the Russian ambassador to the EU chose to hint that Britain might have been responsible for the nerve agent attack.
Porton Down, as we now all know, is the largest military facility in the United Kingdom that has been dealing with chemical weapons research. And it's actually only 8 miles from Salisbury.
You're not suggesting that Porton Down is responsible for this nerve agent?
I don't know. I don't know.
Immediately afterwards, on the same programme, this was the Foreign Secretary's riposte.
This is not the response of a country that really believes itself to be innocent. And their response has been a sort of mixture of smug sarcasm and denial, obfuscation and delay.
And he insisted that the Russians have been doing recent nerve agent research.
We actually have evidence within the last 10 years that Russia has not only been investigating the delivery of nerve agents for the purposes of assassination, but has also been creating and stockpiling Novichok.
So that was a direct lie that I was being given there.
But you will get that.
However, the Foreign Secretary then had to concede that the wife of a former finance minister under Vladimir Putin had paid £160,000 in a Conservative Party auction to play tennis with him.
Did the tennis game actually happen?
It did.
It did.
And after signs of a gap opening up last week between the Labour leadership and Downing Street over the Salisbury attack, this morning the Labour position was much closer to the government's.
Putin has questions to answer because this is highly likely this could be a state execution. But what we don't do in this country is that we don't leap to conclusions without the evidence. And what we're saying to our international partners, working with the chemical weapons inspectors as well, working with Porton Down, we've got to now produce, we will now produce the evidence that leads us to a judgment that they can rely upon.
The Porton Down Military Laboratory is where experts have spent 2 weeks analysing the rare nerve agent used. Tomorrow, international specialists from the Organisation for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons will arrive here to start their own independent analysis of what left Yulia and Sergei Skripal fighting lives. Daniel Sanford, BBC News.
Well, meanwhile, voting is underway across Russia in the country's election, in which President Putin is expected to win a 4th term in office. There are several other candidates, but his main rival, Alexei Navalny, has been barred from taking part after being convicted of fraud, a charge he says was politically motivated. From Moscow, Richard Galpin sent this report.
It's a polling station here in Moscow, a deliberately festive atmosphere, encouraging people to vote. Russians have only known one leader, Vladimir Putin, since 1999. And now they're casting their ballots once again, with the odds stacked heavily in his favour.
With the only serious opposition leader banned from taking part in this election, there's virtually no doubt that Vladimir Putin will win. The issue is going to be the turnout and whether it's sufficient to legitimise another 6 years in power for Mr. Putin.
And although people have been voting here, we soon found scepticism about how genuine this election is.
Formally, there is a real choice, but in reality, I cannot say it is fair because I know people are being forced to vote, especially those working in government institutions.
The president himself voted here in Moscow earlier today. The Kremlin apparently aiming for him at 70% of the vote and of the turnout. But when asked by journalists how many votes would be seen as a success, he said any amount allowing him to be president. Voters in Crimea are also taking part in this presidential election for the first time since the area was annexed from Ukraine. The election date moved to today to coincide with the 4th anniversary, another boost for Mr. Putin.
Now, we must emphasise, of course, that Mr. Putin retained high popularity ratings amongst voters here. But I think there is a question mark about reaching that 70% turnout figure, which apparently the Kremlin wants. And meanwhile, there have been some reports of electoral violations, with reports coming in of ballot boxes being stuffed in one area. But I must again stress that that's only a small number of reports, just in one area.
OK, Richard, thank you very much indeed. Richard Galpin there in Moscow. Much of the United Kingdom has experienced its second significant snowfall of the last few days. Worst affected have been the north and east of the country, and the snow is now falling in South Wales and the southwest of England. Well, combined with sub-zero temperatures and strong winds, the Arctic weather has brought delays and cancellations to public transport and made driving conditions difficult for many, as Frankie McCamley reports.
Late last night in Barnsley, not a sight you'd usually see in March. A truck being pulled to safety by a car in treacherous conditions. And in Halifax, police rescue the driver of this car, who escapes with minor injuries. On the Transpennine Express, an officer's dash cam, the road almost at a standstill. This morning, though, as people try to leave their homes, it proves to be a difficult task. And gritters out on the A68 in Northumberland try to keep things moving. In places on higher ground, like here in West Yorkshire, up to 11 centimetres of snow fell. But the places that saw the most were Hereford and Wattisham, with 13 centimetres. Today, though, the southwest of England and South Wales will be hardest hit, with amber weather warnings in place until 9 o'clock this evening. Elsewhere, there's been more disruption at the airports today, with Bristol, Bournemouth and the East Midlands closing runways. Heathrow and Gatwick have also told passengers to expect delays. Some rugby and football matches have also had to be cancelled too. But for some, there has been fun to be had in what's being dubbed the mini beast from the east, with temperatures expected to return to normal by Tuesday. Frankie McCamley, BBC News in West Yorkshire.
Britain has won its first gold medal at the Winter Olympics in South Korea. Menna Fitzpatrick and her guide Jen Kehoe took the women's visually impaired slalom crown on the final day of the Games, as Kate Gray now reports.
It was the golden moment they'd been waiting for. Menna Fitzpatrick and her guide Jen Kehoe saved their best till last to win gold in the slalom on the final day of these Games. The pair were in silver medal position going into their second run and displayed a perfect performance. The time was unbeatable.
She's in front!
Their fourth medal here in Pyeongchang to become Britain's most successful Winter Paralympians.
We're running on a bit of adrenaline at the moment because this first bronze was just an incredible achievement, to finish that race and win a medal, and then to finish on a gold medal and put in one of our strongest performances this week is beyond words. It hasn't sunk in, and I think probably won't until we get back to the UK and are back in our own beds and have a lie-in.
There was further success as Millie Knight and her guide Brett Wild managed to sneak the bronze in that same race, which means Paralympics GB have reached their target of 7 medals, but all dependent on one sport, one classification and a small number of athletes.
We came into these games with clear potential on both snow and ice. The wheelchair curlers have had a tough week, but I think from my perspective as chef de mission, I'm proud of every single one of the 17 athletes that came here to Pyeongchang to represent Paralympics GB. Yes, the medals came from snow, but every one of those athletes did give it their all.
So the Brits have had plenty to cheer about, and with more nations taking part than ever before and a record number of tickets sold, the International Paralympic Committee can also celebrate, claiming these games to be the greatest Winter Paralympics to date. Kate Gray, BBC News, Pyeongchang.
And that is it from me. The next news on BBC One is at 6:35 this evening. Goodbye for now.